Welcome back to Self on the Shelf and to a 78-degree day in Salt Lake City.
Give it up for Mother Nature.
Still sweater weather for us transplants from Arizona. Our quirky, fun-loving, free-spirited intro is, we're gonna read Girl Defined.
Sex, purity, and the longings of a girl's heart, discovering the beauty and freedom of God-defined sexuality.
Because I, for the last few years, have been having just rampant, immoral, unmarried sex. And
Yeah.
I've just been thinking, you know what the one thing I'm missing in all my experiences is God.
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring God back into the bedroom, or into the bedroom for the first time.
He's there whether you're inviting him or not, but
he is
I think
always watching.
When you give him consent to be there, it adds something.
Yeah, and I read a tweet recently that says that, they said women, but I think it applies to all of us, that we should try to be attractive for God.
Oh.
And so I just really try to put on a show.
Wait, was the tweet saying that, like, if you're a woman, even if you're, like, home alone, you should try and be hot because Daddy God.
I mean, it's worse than that. It was more on like a modesty shtick that was
right,
like,
yeah.
oh, women need to be modest. They don't own their bodies. Their bodies first belong to God and then their husbands.
Love
and it was
that.
like, okay, well, not every woman's married. It's like, well, then you should be attractive to God, and God hates skin. That's why he made you with it. If you like that a lot, you're gonna love this book.
It says this message of God-defined sexuality is one every woman needs. So
I'm every woman.
we haven't really introduced Kara because we just assume you guys would know who she is. We have Nuance Ho here on the channel.
By the way,
It's collab season.
the most recently godly woman out of the three of us, to be honest.
In what way?
And that I only left the church 4 years ago. And I was this woman. I was this like, oh, okay, like God defines sexuality. Okay, like I would pick up this book and be like, what are you going to say, girls?
So part 1 is obviously called Broken Sexuality, and chapter 1 is obviously called We're All Sexually Broken. And I thought we'd just start off with the first story that they share in the book. So first 2 pages, they just share a little story, set the tone, let us know what we're in for here, and I think really establish the problem, which is important to do in any book.
Which is that everyone is so broken. I love that start.
Oh.
Love the premise.
All of us.
It's like when you're at a party and someone's like, you know how we all struggle with that pustule on the bottom of our foot? And you're like, not me, man.
Oh, it's like Jeffrey Holland gave some quote that was like, no one has ever been given license to go their own way because of their intellect or whatever. And I'm like, plenty of people have, Jeff. You just were never given that license. And now you're projecting that onto the whole of humanity. No one's ever been given it. Okay. Questions, comments?
I was just going to say, I love your Easter nails.
Thank you. Yeah, I did.
Damn it.
These are for the Easter Bunny, though, not for Jesus. This magazine was unlike anything I, Bethany, had ever seen before in my short 8 years of life. So she's at the age of accountability in Mormon years, which I just think is important to note.
And I know we're like setting up to think it's like a Playboy or something, but it's surely like a Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
I stared down at its pages, flopping in the wind. The once glossy cover was dirty and worn, as though one too many cars had run over it. But the images, what was this? Looking up, I saw 10-year-old Kristen walking toward me on the sidewalk. Hey, come here, I said to her in a half whisper. I found something really interesting. Kristen hurried towards me. What is it? She asked. I don't know. Once Kristen reached me, she looked down at the magazine lying at my feet. Like a natural big sister, she picked it up without hesitation. After staring at the cover for several seconds, she flipped through the crumpled pages. Looking at me with a nervous face, she quietly said, "Come on, let's go inside." She rolled the magazine up in her hands and we quietly went inside the house. Once we were in one of the bedrooms with the door shut, Kristen dropped the magazine on the floor. We both stood there silently for several minutes. We weren't sure what to do. After gaining some courage, we began to flip through the pages.
It's just a science weekly. They've never heard of science. It's been totally demonized in their family.
I don't understand what's happening here, I said to Kristen while pausing on one of the 4-page images. As if, do you think she actually said that? I'm not sure either, she said. Kristen and I, innocent girls, were being exposed to pornographic images for the first time in our lives. Our little hearts beat faster. Although we didn't understand the images we were seeing, we knew something wasn't right. I am curious because it's described as a magazine, so I'm guessing like it's a Playboy at worst. It's not showing like actual sexual acts happening. I'm guessing.
No, yeah.
I'm guessing they're seeing female nudity, which.
Yeah.
As a woman, as a kid, shouldn't really be that jarring because, like, you see your mum naked, like...
Their mom dresses in a burlap sack, you know?
Even around her own daughters?
I'm sure, yeah. Breasts, what?
I can say from personal experience, from being exposed to, like, you know, the pornography at a young age versus seeing a naked woman versus seeing something that's pornographic, there is a big difference.
There's a different vibe, yeah.
My childhood brain was like, that's a naked woman. I get that people like looking at that versus like, why is he peeing in her mouth? Why would she want that in her mouth?
I'm guessing they're not seeing images of someone peeing in someone's mouth, though.
I don't know of a magazine that offers like full intercourse.
No, me neither.
It's probably out there. But
it's Playboy at worst, maybe Sports Illustrated.
We need to write them an
They
email.
have much more artistic.
Could even a stretch Cosmopolitan. Sound off in the comments. What do you think?
But the Cosmopolitan contains porn, as the billboards along I-15
Do you
will tell
remember
you.
that? That was a good time. So Kristen suddenly said, we need to get rid of this. Yeah, I think so too, I said as I stood up. With sweaty palms, we checked the hallway, quickly dashed outside, and ran down the sidewalk. The fresh air and bright sunshine felt good.
Palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms heavy.
Here, Kristen said, suddenly stopping. We were 4 houses down from our home. Standing near our neighbour's large brick mailbox, she started digging in the ground with her hands. It's so sad that they're feeling shame for just having stumbled upon this thing that is like, it's not their fault, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Help me, she said in a whispered panic. What are we doing? Why are you digging? Oh, you're going to bury it. Jumping on the ground to help her, I ripped up that rock-infested dirt as fast as I could. I never wanted to see those strange images again. Once the hole was big enough, we folded the magazine into fourths and laid it inside. Working as a team, we piled the dirt back into the hole. With our hands slightly bleeding and our nails jammed with dirt, we stood back. I mean, that's the real grievous thing here, is like these little girls are bleeding and panicking. That's how much at 8 they've already had nudity and I suppose sexuality
So demonized.
That they'll like literally hurt themselves. Like that's, man.
We looked at our little pile. The tiny dirt mound resembled a miniature gravesite. We felt free. That strange magazine had made us feel weird. Wiping our dirty hands on our floral t-shirts, we headed back to the house. Our secret would remain as buried as that magazine for the next decade.
Till we dug it back up. See what all the fuss was about.
Something that surprised me in this book is that Bethany talks about how she struggled with masturbation growing up, which I think is rather bold for a godly woman to admit. Am I crazy?
Should we turn to those pages?
Normally they
think
only
we
do it
should.
in like roundabout ways, you know?
I'm going to go ahead and say she's not a bad writer. Despite, the subject matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not the worst. Better than Jack Whalen.
Yeah.
I felt her trauma through her writing in ways that Jack does not.
She says as she grew into a teenager, she noticed something else changing. My desires. Without warning, I began experiencing sexual desires and longings. That's where sex education would come in handy, because ideally you would get warned that like you're going to start having different sorts of feelings.
Right.
My imagination wandered into fantasies that had been foreign to me previously. I was attracted to boys in new and exhilarating ways. And then she writes, I often wondered, are these good feelings or bad feelings? And she also writes about how she had a period where she worked at a Christian bookstore and started reading some like mild Christian romance novels, and even that they appealed to her, but she was like questioning whether those
too
feelings were good or bad.
intense.
The emotional connection
Yeah.
led to a sexual connection, and she's like, I can't have either of those.
Being a repressed
Yeah.
Christian teenager
Goodness.
is whack. I remember that, of being like, I feel like I'm being pushed to the edge here. And it was like so innocuous. I was just so repressed.
So she's having like these developmentally appropriate feelings, which clearly she's not choosing, because she's saying my imagination wandered into new fantasies, as
free will. You can't
teenagers
choose
do.
your thoughts. It's okay, girl.
Yeah, but it's
Totally
so
normal.
sad, because it's clearly something that is just happening to her as it happens to most teenagers, and she's already so hot on it as a young teenager with like, am I good or am I bad? Every thought has to mean something good or something bad. I'm giving my thoughts so much power.
Yeah.
And like moralizing my thoughts, which I just generally think is a bad road to go down. Tanner, if you have a spiel you want to go on about that.
That's my spiel.
Yeah, bad road to go down.
Sam can tell you I just barely got that like a week ago.
After Taylor Swift in Vegas. And then she talks a lot about how she does, she reads these books, which are Christian books on purity and stuff, but it doesn't make her longings go away, which, maybe worth thinking about.
The yearning never ends. What's her name?
Bethany.
Bethany.
Oh, it's actually Kristen who wrote about masturbation, by the way.
Oh, okay.
And she
It was
even
Bethany who
says,
found the magazine.
even before I hit puberty, I discovered masturbation. As an 11-year-old girl, I had no idea what I was doing, but it seemed good. It felt natural. More on that in the chapters to come. It's not natural. Just because a child stumbles upon it innocently
Wait,
doesn't
did she
mean
say
they
it's not
should.
natural?
Yeah, she said it felt natural. More on that in the chapters to come. Ooh, Gold Star Christian Girls.
Been to that website.
Ethically made.
Sourced with real Christians.
So me and Cara are women in our 30s. I mean, me just barely 30, but they
Me.
say now as women
Middle-aged.
in our 30s, as women in our 30s, we have a completely different perspective. Our eyes have been opened to the reality and depth of our sin, and we've discovered something profound. We were never actually good, not even close. Our hearts were never whole, they were broken. Our desires were never perfect because they were always distorted by our sinful condition. Our hearts
Original
were
sin.
never, they were broken.
It's
So-
literally a pessimistic view of humanity and
So
life. It's so
pessimistic.
sad.
God gave you these inclinations before you were even old enough to like conceptualize what they were, and you're characterizing your 11-year-old self or 8-year-old self or whatever as having being of a sinful condition. And you're a child. I mean, like, what is more pessimistic? What is more like anti-children than casting children
It's
as
because
sinners?
the paradigm of Christianity is you have to be told you're broken in every way, because the idea of the good news of the Savior can never be good news if you're not broken in every way. And telling a child that their basic 11-year-old masturbation is part of your original sin of like, you do need a Savior to come from this. There's no way that you can have a Savior with you feeling any kind of non-judgment about these behaviors.
You've hit the nail on the head there, because she immediately starts talking about how thankfully Jesus died on the cross and rose again to conquer the power of sin and provide a way for us to have a relationship with God. God who gave us these longings.
Think about God as a creator. Can you think of a creator in any context? Musician, painter, poet, gardener, who like fundamentally hates their creations, who is like, everything I'm doing is to its core evil and bad.
And it needs to prove this song needs to prove itself to me. Like, who the fuck are you? Yeah. These flowers that I'm growing in my garden.
So evil and wicked and fallen and cursed, and they just need to beg for
They
forgiveness.
better get it together and deny their natural state. What happened to considering the lilies of the field? Consider the 11-year-old of the suburbs.
Yeah. They just live, they grow, they blossom, they follow their natural life cycle, they get their natural urges, they act them. It's like, that's just life. That's what you've been created for. Why do you hate it?
I'm kind of curious, and if anyone is like quite up to date on girl-defined stuff, please comment about this. But it seems like lately, Bethany at least, I saw a podcast where she's kind of now endorsing the idea that masturbation in a marriage might be okay if it's to ultimately
Preparatory gospel.
Yeah, but they call it what do they call it? I think they call it like self-preparation, or they give it a different name.
That's amazing. I love the rebrand.
It's a big rebrand. Yeah.
I did that all through high school. I was self-preparating. I was like, Mom, the door's locked because I'm self-preparating for my marriage.
We've all experienced some form of sexual struggle or distortion due to sin. None of us are completely
Or
whole.
due to religion.
I know, like that's the perfect theology for selling you a solution, isn't it? Just being like, absolutely no one is enough by themselves. Everyone needs an external source of self-worth.
We've all had perfectly normal feelings distorted through the aperture of a debunked and antiquated theology, mediated through people trying to take our money. It's great.
This says that God created us as sexual beings to teach us spiritual truths about himself. Quite narcissistic, if you ask me. Also kind of weird, like making your children sexual so that they'll learn about you. Don't love that. He created us with an ache for intimacy to draw us into an authentic relationship with him. I just personally feel like if you're like aching for sexual intimacy, you don't turn to your dad. That's not appropriate. You have your relationship with your dad. Completely separate thing. Totally separate. Ideally, no crossover whatsoever.
It sounds like Dad himself has an aching for intimacy that he needs to
100%.
satiate on his own.
That he created billions of children for. Like, he's the one who's
Never
really
enough.
been aching for intimacy, and he can never be satisfied.
I mean, he created us in his image, right? And apparently we're all sexually broken, and
yeah.
so what are we learning about that,
If you think that, like, you are, at least as a Mormon, you feel like you are God in embryo, and that, like, you're learning these powers of creation, so the feelings of sexuality are supposed to be just as strong as the feelings that God would feel when he's creating. Do you know what I mean? Did you ever get in that mindset where, like, sexuality is so powerful that it needs to be bridled because that's the exact power that God used to create this world? Like, that's why it feels so intense.
Which is touching on a truth, which is touching
on a truth,
religion
yeah.
takes something that is a very powerful life
A
force,
creative impulse.
gatekeeps it, or like gets you to gatekeep it in yourself, and then, have to atone for when you cross the line.
Yeah. And that
then-
power is just
and
the
then
drive
you
of
channel-
evolution. It's not necessarily like from a heavenly maker.
It kind of makes me think it was kind of a stereotype at BYU Idaho that a lot of the gay kids would be just aggressively into like social clubs, and they would be like the president of different societies, and it's like, because you gotta channel that repressed energy somewhere, and everyone else is getting to at least like unlock it a little bit by like having, you know, a boyfriend or girlfriend and making out, and it's like that's just not allowed if you're a gay person. Just something to think about.
I was talking with a gay friend recently who told me that he was a non-Mormon growing up in Utah and was student body president, president of everything, until a Mormon teacher, sabotaged and was like, "You can't be the class president because you're not Mormon. We don't know what kind of values you uphold." Isn't that crazy?
Chilling. Okay. Well, the next thing I want to dive into in this book is gender, because obviously it's a hot topic today, hot button issue.
Can't wait.
I think it's something that our understanding of is always evolving as we move throughout time. So this book is here to tell us, men and women, what's the difference. Let's unpack a few of the major differences between men and women.
We're going to get to sex before marriage, right? Because I have a spiel locked.
Oh,
and
totally.
loaded.
We will not let you
Thank
go
you.
spielless. So these simple explanations of the difference between men and women are going to help us better understand the way we tick, and also the way
We tick
the
off
other
God.
gender ticks.
I was going to say, and how we tickle. Like, how we tick and how we tickle.
They're also going to help us recognize the root motives of our lust. This is written to women. It says they will also help you recognize the root motives of your lust compared to the root motives of a man's lust.
Do women experience lust?
They did
I thought
actually
women were
cover
supposed to
that.
be formless, sexless.
This chapter is called Lust, a Girl's Problem Too.
Oh,
Very
they're being
progressive.
real. This has got to be better than a boomer take, at least.
Okay. They do say keep in mind that these are stereotypical differences. They are not always 100% true for every man and every woman. Very progressive.
Some nuance.
So men.
What's your
Men.
thing?
No. Tana, listen up. You got a lot to learn about
Lust,
yourself.
we have two, the whole thing.
Men are created to pursue and often find the pursuit of a woman stimulating. Agree, disagree.
Someone will be like, can't relate.
Yeah. We all have dopamine systems that encourage us to pursue various goals, including and somewhat foremost, it's a very basic impulse to pursue a sexual
It's like
partner.
food, then sex.
Yeah.
Men are sexually aroused by what they see, which is why women often wear lingerie. So true. So true.
Women also can get aroused from things that they see.
Well, let's see.
Hold off.
We don't know that yet. Men typically find the physical aspect of a relationship more pleasurable than the emotional. Do they typically find? Is that something we want to be
Is this how like we
penetrating?
all are broken sexually? It's like everyone's relationship is just like mine and my husband's. They don't love the emotional part. You know how husbands hate their wives.
It's just interesting because this is written from the perspective of people that just believe in marriage, right? You ideally just like one person forever. And to say that men typically find the physical aspect of a relationship more pleasurable than the emotional, and it's only married Christian men who are having a physical aspect, that's kind of disturbing because it's like that's not much to go on in a marriage, you know, if the physical is number one.
Is this one of those like excuse me, I've been only a not conservative Christian for like 4 years. So is this one of those things where it's kind of the toxic masculinity where men judge each other by how many women they can sleep with, and so their sexual prowess, it just generally in culture that translates into Christian of like how many times you have sex is like how you find your value and your worth in your marriage bed, and that is just perpetuated among just like male culture generally, and like how much you spend emotionally talking about your like worries and crying with your wife is not, and like the emotional side is not allowed to blossom as much.
I do think there's truth
Culturally
in that
speaking.
because thinking about Paul and Morgan, it seems like it's such a core struggle in their marriage that Paul wants to have sex all the time and she does not want to have sex with Paul, cannot stress this enough. And it seems like that really has wounded his masculinity. There was that really chilling clip where he talked about how he was basically saying it was just him telling his own experience but trying to project it onto like, and this is a lesson for you guys, but it was like he basically thinks that when they're in a fight, Morgan should have sex with him anyway because he's been excited all day to have sex. So just because, and she's like, no, I'm not gonna have sex with you, you're being an asshole basically. And then like in the video which they posted, there's like this moment where he's like, wait, you knew how hard that was for me? And she was like, yeah, I knew, but I didn't want to have sex with you because we were in a fight, you know? And he was just like stony, stone cold.
I'm sorry that was so hard for you. I can't imagine this is your Gethsemane. It's no surprise that they don't assume that Christian men are emotionally fulfilled by their relationships, because Christian men are not conditioned to be in touch with their own emotions or feelings or thoughts, or they're not given the skills to unpack them in any meaningful way, because everything is so repressive and just follow the Bible. But like in a healthy relationship, the emotional and the physical aspect can't be differentiated. Like,
I know.
what makes the physical so beautiful and so special and wonderful is that you have that emotional connection, and that's what without either one, you don't have the same.
Which is clearly why Paul and Morgan struggle when you watch, because you're like, these two people are on completely different pages. Like, they're both so dedicated to trying to fit each other into these predefined roles, and also to kind of force themselves into those predefined roles, that they're not authentically connecting, it seems.
Not forcing into predefined holes, too.
Again, Christians on Twitter saying women's body is owned by the husband and then God. And like in the Mormon temple, thank God they cut it out, but they used to say, you covenant to obey your husband and as he obeys the Father. And
Which only cut that out a few years ago, right?
yeah.
I just think
that was the covenant I made when I got married, and it made sense to me. I was like, yeah, right. And the second he stops obeying God, then I don't have to obey him.
I just think all this is interesting because there's an argument to be made for like a lot of Jesus's original teachings, if we take them at face value, which like I don't know how much we can, but like there are messages in the New Testament that seem to be advocating for this like unifying sense of spirituality and less separation. And it feels like Christianity, especially American evangelical Christianity, is all about separating like the mind and the body, the emotional from the physical. It's all about creating these completely unnecessary separations that actually harm us and make us less at one-ment.
But then our struggle to overcome the problems that we ourselves have created become the bulwark of our faith and the measure of our testimony.
Oh, what was the quote I was thinking of yesterday that's like...
Knees weak, arms are heavy.
More about men. Men long to be sexually desired by their wives. This affirms their masculinity and lets them know they are valued and respected. Men are physically designed to give to the woman in a sexual relationship. A man's physical design is only a mere reflection of his overall distinct role. Women.
Love being confined to a role.
Roles, not relationships. That's what we've always said. Women are created to respond and often find, or to not respond, I think is the highest ideal with a woman. And often find being pursued by a man very stimulating. So true.
Yeah.
So true, can relate. Women are sexually aroused by touch as opposed to men.
They just want to see. Look, do not touch.
And want to be desirable and touchable. This is one of the reasons women enjoy wearing lingerie. Women typically enjoy physical pleasure most when it's in conjunction with emotional closeness.
I hope we all. Right?
Again, I really think...
Women long to be desired relationally by their husbands. This affirms their femininity and lets them know they are loved and cherished. Women are physically designed to receive from the man in a sexual relationship. A woman's physical design is only a mere reflection of her overall distinct role.
What does the placement of the male G-spot say about a man's ability to receive?
Very interesting question.
Just curious.
Yes.
What are you doing with that, God? You're gonna do it? You're gonna do whatever you want to do? Direct evolution if you choose?
God has a G-spot, the God spot.
So they kind of wrap this up by saying the reason that they're telling us all this is because men and women typically give love and receive love differently.
That all seemed really similar. It's like they love lingerie, they love to pursue and feel pursued.
So like women care about emotions and men don't really.
They just want to look.
But didn't they go back and say that like they desire to be sexually received?
Long to be desired sexually by
and
their
this
wives.
affirms their masculinity.
They
to
want
let
their
them
wives to
know.
want to have sex with them. Hot take. As opposed to other people.
I prefer indifference.
Yeah. If it's not apathy, it's not turning me on.
Gimp suit, don't move.
Oh, it seems like it's such a big thing in their little Christian circle for women to sort of seek counsel from older women about stuff like sex, which I just think is a bit of a recipe for disaster because it seems
They're informed
like...
even earlier in the timeline of...
Yeah.
I thought I've heard from a lot of like formerly Mormon women that other women would be like, just, your husband's going to want to have sex all the time. And if you just
go with it.
Turn off your brain.
Yep.
Just
think of England.
the lakes.
The lakes. Go to the lakes in your mind. So this says we need to change the narrative about lust, and that's going to be hugely helpful for Christian women. So with more people talking, this is like their pseudo-progressiveness. They're like, with more people talking about lust as a human problem, not just a guy problem, our hope is that more women will be honest about their struggles. And it's like, okay, I feel like most people at this point in the world, 2019 when this was published, are well aware that women feel sexual desires too.
And not thinking of it as a problem.
But also, I'm like, in patriarchal Christian culture, it's often the men that are the more sexually dysfunctional because they get away with it more because the power structure is such that they can like prey on women more. Like women can't get away with that in the same way, So I feel like that's maybe why they've heard it kind of through that lens of like it's all men. Like there's no awareness in this that like there's a reason your religion talked about this as just a guy problem for so long, and because it's all part of this like patriarchal, quite rapey culture. As you think about the problem of lust and the status of our society today, you may easily get discouraged. Sexuality may feel more like a curse than a blessing. Everywhere you turn, you come face to face with alluring temptations inviting you to join in. Anyway, women genuinely want victory through the power of Christ, I think is the moral of that story.
Lay back and think of the victory of power of Christ.
The biblical battle of lust. I don't remember that one.
I'm going to say brag, brag, brag. Not all of us have opportunities left and right. Some of us just have to meander aimlessly while nobody seeks us out. Just kidding. I mean, I get around.
Can you imagine how shocking those first few moments must have been for Adam and Eve? Don't you wonder what was going through their minds the moment sin flooded their existence? Is that kind of how Christians see it? Like, there's the fall and then boom, sin flooded.
Yeah, before he was just a primate, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God,
and primates don't get horny.
I am an abomination in the eyes of God.
Yeah, what's her point there? Can you imagine how he felt? Like, did he have shame already like baked into his DNA when he was
The male
created?
and the female were experiencing brokenness for the first time.
She's like, what the heck? I used to be a rib. What am I doing? Who am I?
Adam's like, I watch animals fuck all the time. I'm not like, this is not a problem for me.
Through the Christian lens, it was a sin, right, for Eve to eat the fruit.
That profoundly.
But then, how was she
perfect.
capable of sin when she was perfect?
Yeah, it's hard.
She was tempted by Satan. That's
Again,
why.
it goes back to that thing of like, how can you think that a child is sinful? I personally don't think a child is sinful. If a child does something wrong, like to hurt others, to cause unnecessary suffering in the world, then that is the job of society and that child's, adult figures in their life to correct that behavior and maybe that distorted thinking. But I don't see the child as sinful. And really, when's the point where that stops being true?
You're just trying to complexify this with your liberal talking points. Everybody knows that 6,000 years ago, a woman was taken out of the rib of a man, was given a fruit by a talking snake, and then everybody has felt like shit ever since.
And if you don't feel like shit, there's nothing wrong with you.
I'm trying to understand what she's saying here, because it's a little bit different than the Mormon context, but she's literally saying that all the generations experience its own sexual struggles as a result of the sin of Adam and Eve's original direct decision to reject God's truth was the beginning of the worldwide domino effect. What God had created is to be beautiful, so sexuality, they had to be in God's line.
So then were they boning
polluted.
before? Were they boning before the fall?
Right,
No.
and if God intended everything to be beautiful, why is he so fucking pissy about everything?
Yeah, because he's kind of making it very stressful.
I know, they're acting like he's the optimist who just got thwarted by somebody that he also created.
Like, how is it suddenly tainted? It's because they rejected God's rule not to eat the fruit, and now everything is cast that you're in a river of sin now as humanity.
Yep.
And God has a better purpose for sexuality, but he's really fuzzy on the details.
You just gotta feel really bad first.
Yeah.
Our struggles are
He's like, but don't worry, I killed my son for you.
Our struggles are no different from Eve's. I would beg to differ. Eve has never felt what it's like to have DoorDashed your groceries and still not have the energy to go down and pick them up.
I ate a fruit yesterday. He was delicious.
Sponsored by the Field app.
This is a sort of Christian talking point that I feel like is worth touching on, which is this idea that sex has become so commonplace that it often feels cheap, meaningless, and as if it's no big deal. And they kind of cast this as like it's either the Christian way of no sex before marriage and, patriarchal gender roles, or it's sex is meaningless, cheap, and worthless. There's no awareness of the fact that, like, I think a lot of people in the secular world would say that sex is sacred and it is important that you arrive at it intentionally and all that. It's not just like cheap or the Christian way. Tana, what you?
I
can hardly see you
if
over
you're
there.
not racked with guilt from something that happened to an imaginary person 6,000 years ago every time you have sex, then sex just doesn't mean anything to you.
Cheap.
Yeah, because she goes
You
on
really
to
need
say
the angst
that
to
the
feel-
betrayal of sex, because she's not speaking from a place of experience. If you've never experienced this, like maybe for some people it's really commonplace and they don't give, there's not, you know, it maybe does take a piece of them. Maybe parts of that, like, you know, that Velcro analogy versus the sticky tape analogy that Christians like to do, that every time you have sex with somebody is like your tape gets, it's like maybe that's true for some people, that like sex is not the best part of that they should be doing in that part of their journey, but like it's not really your place to say what's meaningless for other people and how they show up sexually. So when she says that the portrayal of how society views sex is so common that it will put you to sleep. So it's like you are having sex that you even think you could go to sleep with. I've never even been close to falling asleep during sex. Not when I was Mormon and not now.
Everyone has to figure out their own relationship with their sexuality, and for some people, the most healthy sort of self-loving thing, maybe not having sex with other people.
Yeah,
Like, that could be
valid.
a thing. And for other people, maybe it is, you know, sex being taken somewhat lightly, though obviously still with like consent and intentionality. You can still, you can have sex be like fun and light and casual, but still be like intentional and conscious, and have it, and still be aware of the fact that you are two humans coming together and engaging in an intimate act. And like people can exist on every level of that spectrum and be healthy. It's really not about how little or how much sex you're having, because you could be someone who's having no sex and be like very mentally unhealthy and have a very twisted relationship with your sexuality, and it's not beautiful, it's shame-based, and you know, just like messing you up and also just throwing you off in every other area of your life because apparently you can't focus.
This is my favorite rant
These
ever
are
done.
not groundbreaking points, you guys all know this, but it's just like anything you restrict becomes more attractive. If that's why diets don't work, that's why like generally like not letting kids have any sugar whatsoever, and then they go to a birthday party, they binge on cake. Like any form of restriction tends to make people want the thing more because it makes it become what's the word?
Forbidden fruit.
Exactly.
To borrow
That which is forbidden
metaphor.
is more erotic, which is also why we see like more dysfunctional outbursts of sexuality a lot of the time in these like repressive cultures, is because it's forbidden, and also because it's just all forbidden, so it all gets lumped together, and that's a whole other thing. But
I would say too, to add to that, like not only is it like the construct of what religion is putting on you of when you should have sex and with who and at what stage in your life, like I think like the patriarchal culture for both like men and women generally, they put on you of like what it means to be desirable is because you've had sex with this many people or those different things. And so it's coming to a place of like, if having sex with 0 people is the healthiest thing for you, like you're not listening to the other constructs of either religion, or it's being very like owning yourself and your sexuality first. And that if you do choose to engage, you know, you're doing it from a place where it's not out of the construct of what's expected of you at what time and what place and with who. It's coming from like your own.
which,
like,
by the
upward.
way, under Christianity, or this version of Christianity, once you're a married woman, you are expected to have sex with your husband even when you don't feel like it.
You can't grow anything healthy
You-
from that, really. Like
just- Yeah.
you're going to be showing up for everyone but yourself if you don't.
That's so spooky.
Yeah, and how many times have we watched? I've watched so many just like videos of different people like us reacting to Christian content or Christian content itself about sex, like Paula Morgan, these two, everyone kind of in that genre, and it seems like it's a rampant problem that women don't want to be having sex in their marriages, and they're trying to find ways to like make sex bearable for them because they've just been taught to turn it off their whole lives, and then it's not what they think. They're sold this fantasy, and then they're already married, and then there's no way out, and like it just makes me sad. Sorry, we're not breaking any new ground here.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. It's good to have it all in one place. And I just want to say, I feel like even though it kind of seems peripheral to the greater question of Christianity, I really do think that Christianity as an institution has been perpetuated primarily or secondarily for this end, also to acquire political power, first and foremost, beginning with the various churches and Constantine and all that, but also to establish a man's place and a woman as his property that owes him sexual favor. Like, that is biblical. There's a reason why those biblical teachings were compiled into that book that has been taught as the way that you have to abide by in God's living word that you can't question for any reason. 100%. It's because it's this patriarchal system of men wanting to keep women subjugated and forcibly use as a resource for sex. The God of the Bible is like into genocide, into rape, into capital punishment, corporal punishment for children, and you're like, you worship that God who's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and you're like, oh yeah, he was totally cool with like torture and murder and rape and slavery and genocide, but then one day was just like, actually, you know what, after I killed my son, I had a change of heart, and I want to be a nice guy from now on.
Yeah.
Like, how could you be comfortable worshiping that God?
He did his shadow work somewhere in between.
He
did.
He met a really, really powerful therapist, shaman therapist. It's kind of ambiguous.
Yeah, he doesn't like to name drop.
You know, my favorite apologetic is because that was the first thing that really started one of my faith crises. And I remember I read that it was because Jesus or God needed to. It was like a stern schoolmaster. Like the Old Testament is just being a stern schoolmaster. Like I know that those children could just go up and like live normal like non-sex slaves lives, but like I needed you to be a schoolmaster and like actually go and rape and pillage.
Like why? You know?
Yeah, why? Like what kind of schoolmaster is like, oh yeah, the punishment for that is death. Everyone in the class is going to throw rocks at you until you die. Like that's crazy.
And children have had the same. Like basically the same sort of neurological wiring even in biblical times.
Right.
So God, an omniscient God would know. Is omniscient all-knowing?
Yeah. Or
would understand a child's psychology and would understand how damaging that is and how it would just completely set them up for failure in life, and they would have, if you believe in free will, even less free will, you know, from the fact that they were trauma. Anyway, it just is just like a complete shit show. As we all know,
this is where we're getting our biblical sex guides, because it's got to be biblical. God didn't say it.
Gotta be Bible.
It's not good.
It's tough. I hope you guys like this like random podcast format, by the way, where we're all just basically hanging out. Like,
I think that's our whole thing.
Yeah. Sometimes
They're
we do
on
more
board.
structure. Sometimes we just want to flick through a book and see what's up. But it's just like there's so much focus in Christianity on like don't have sex before marriage, don't masturbate, don't look at porn, blah 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 blah, and like which like so minimizes all the actual problems, which are like it's not something I can minimize, like God condoning the rape of children or anyone. Like that's not a side issue or like something that I'm willing to justify in the name of my religion. But when you're in these high control groups that have co-opted your identity from a young age, you'll literally justify child rape while then also having this weird self-righteousness about people who have sex before marriage, and they look at people like us and they think, oh, so sinful, and sex is so cheap for them, even if they've you know been in a 5-year relationship with like the love of their life, whatever. And yeah, just like it's just completely
Where's
backwards.
the humanity?
And this is a great segue for my little spiel about marriage. I'm going for it right now because Christians across the board usually are like, except for the more liberal ones, say that you have to be married before you have sex, and that's just kind of the standard. As if marriage has been an institution that has existed since day one. And they'll say, well, he put Adam and Eve together, and he's like, well, did he take them to the local government, to the local notary, and have them sign papers? If so, then it doesn't count. What you're saying is marriage didn't function like that. It was literally just two people and some invisible thing that was like, which is all anybody needs, is like a genuine connection that feels good for both people. And this idea that like the most powerful cartel in any geographic region has to approve of your relationship before God does, like, what are you talking about? Okay, you live in a country, your country gets invaded by barbarian, cruel, evil people. They're the government now. Do they have to approve in order for God to approve of me? That's crazy. Why does their opinion matter at all? And that's the situation that we're in right now. You think the United States is led by Christians or good people or people who stand in the will of God in any way? You think that the notary or any of the stuff is like God? That has nothing to do with God. It's like literally a system that exists on Earth today that like, I don't know, I'm spinning my wheels at this point, but you know what I'm saying? Like, this is made up. Marriage has not existed in this form. It's existed in other forms, and not just in Christian marriage. Like, it didn't start with Christians. It started in other places as a way of like exchanging women as property. And here's my 12-year-old daughter. Now she is your property. And it's like, oh, I'm so glad we have to abide by the relics of that system for to be invited to my parents' house, for instance.
Yeah, like if there's been 50,000 gods that humans have created, how many different wedding ceremonies or just bonds or unions or rituals have all those different tribes and societies? And so just because we're in America right now and the church is stationed in Salt Lake City, Utah.
That's moment, yeah.
Well, ours or whoever else you want to talk about. Sorry, I forgot we're talking about Christianity. But just generally speaking, evangelical Christianity that would need to, say you're redefining marriage. That's a very, unique 21st century take on everything.
God really cares.
Cares about it right now.
Cares about your tax bracket. He really wants to make sure that everyone's being able to do joint taxes together. That's what he really, really cares about.
That's how it's unified.
It's such a weird scarcity mindset as well, and it's like it's so linked to patriarchy, and it also is so linked to capitalism. But it's like, what's the danger in everyone? If everyone can just like love and honor each other as human beings in their sexual relationships, like truly, why does it matter if they have sex with one person or 100 people? As long as that like love and consent and intentionality is there, what's the issue?
Literally, what's the issue?
Well, the
Your
issue
is that
like,
you have an issue with it.
Yeah, and throughout history, women have been property, and like men don't like the idea that women can have sex with multiple people because in our species, women control access to sex, right? Because women are the receivers, as they say. Women are the ones who let the men in.
What is the problem with people having sex? The conservative argument is you can't just go around having sex because that will make so many kids and all these kids on welfare. The children that are produced from sometimes casual sexual encounters.
Right.
And
using birth control is not good enough.
And the statistics that single moms and children born to single parents where the mother and father are not married statistically turn out worse, that whole argument.
Sure. Well, our society is not set up to support single mothers.
I think the answer just comes down to women's sexual autonomy from their bodies, choosing when they want to be able to get pregnant, with who, and if they want to be able to have sex, that it can be not tied to always having to like carry a child and have that be part of you and give, years of your life away to something that you're not prepared to do. So overall, I think like with the invention of birth control and its accessibility, and then sometimes abortion, depending on sometimes where you live, overall, like we're just moving into this better sphere of understanding our sexuality as women in relationship to men, in relationship to just gender being as fluid as it can be, that our sexuality can be decoupled so much from the raising and bearing of children for the first time. And that's not a bad thing. That's the thing. It's like, it's actually a good thing. It makes us all, I think, a better, healthy society, which is the most crazy, sinful, like liberal thing that could ever come out of my mouth. Like 4 years ago, I'd be like, who is that girl? But like, I truly believe that now. And it sounds like blasphemy, but.
Well, I think it honors the sacredness of sex more, not to reduce it just to childbirth.
Yeah.
Child making.
It's funny because they'll say, oh, you're supposed to get married and then just have faith that in God's timing, that you have sex, and then if you get pregnant, you get pregnant. It's not yours to control, which is such a weird projection of your idea of God being like, okay, we're God's an embryo, right? Like he wants us to be like him, creators, conscious creators.
We don't get to have license over that.
Right. It's like, wouldn't being more like a conscious creator be like figuring out what like works and making conscious decisions about your creative process? Like a population of deer may have a really good spring and populate a ton, and then all starve to death come fall because of population dynamics and things like that.
That's a good point.
The deer had faith, but it was not good for them because they were just doing whatever felt natural. Like you were saying, the advent of birth control and things is literally empowering women to be more conscious creators, more godlike in that way.
So Girl Defined has an article on their website about birth control. Seems like they're against it. And they started out, they say, Planned Parenthood CEO Cecil Richards stated, the pill completely changed women's ability to pursue whatever their dreams were.
They're
this
like,
is obviously, this is being written
like having a YouTube channel or writing a book, They just view everything as so boiled down. Like there's no humanity, there's no real spirituality in this. They just see people as just like these fucking creatures.
This section is about the pill. Why modern women love it. I love when they tell us why we love things.
Are we on their website now?
Yeah,
I love being a modern woman and loving birth control and not having 10 kids. Call me a modern woman. I'm not in touch with whatever Stone Age you're living in, but
that's another thing. Like having 10 kids. I bet if there's a lot of data on that, that's probably not ideal.
I got married at 19. I'm 34 right now. I could totally have had 12 kids if I just popped one out every year.
Chilling.
I'm on birth control for the acne.
Vasectomy king. These are the 4 lies. Exposing the lies.
Is that like the opposite of the 4 agreements?
Yeah. The 4 lies about our sexual design. Lie 1, sexual identity is determined by personal desires. And that is
that seems,
not
yeah, of
true.
course, way too realistic. We need to abstractify this. Refuse to deal with anything in reality.
She shits on a high school counselor who told a girl, "It's your body, your sexuality, and your brain. You can choose to act on your desires in whatever way feels right to you. Don't let anyone tell you what to do or not to do. Be true to your inner self." No
Sounds
good.
like an incredible
No
counselor.
good. Sounds like a counselor for Satan.
Like how they put that sexual orientation can come in many different forms of gender and gender identity. And it can come in lesbian, straight, gay, bisexual, and asexual. I would love for them to tell us how it comes in asexual, especially.
Well, I think even if you're asexual, you should still get into a patriarchal gendered relationship and
Exactly.
have sex.
Overcome through the
I
power
know.
of Christ.
Nothing
Right.
honors the
Overcome
sacredness
the
of sex like forcing asexual people to have it.
Exactly.
Lie 2. Marriage is a union between any two partners. Obviously not, because it has to be a man and a woman.
Of course.
3.
Man and his concubines.
Sex should be, yeah, right. Sex should be embraced in whatever way seems right. That's another no-no.
I hear rumors of people putting sexual organs in each other's mouths. Disgusting, unnatural.
It tells the story of a girl who wasn't having sex with her college boyfriend. And it says her friends were confused as to why she wasn't having sex with her boyfriend. They would say things such as, "Don't the two of you love each other? Sex is simply a physical expression of how much you and Jake care for each other. You need to stop overthinking this. Everyone's doing it. It's normal." I wonder if those are the exact things her friends were saying. But it's like, yeah, if you, Jennifer, love Jake and sex is a thing you want to do together, then yeah, sex absolutely can be a physical expression of how much you care for each other. But then the thing is just like, yeah, but that's not God's design.
That's just actually...
That's not what God wants.
I'm going to give you like a super rational, reasonable kind thing, and then just be like, but it's actually not that for reasons. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing too? When I made that video response to Hannah Stoddard, who's this very Mormon traditionalist, and she doesn't believe in kissing until she is married as a Mormon girl. And I just like casually mentioned that in my video, but ripped her apart in a bunch of different ways. But she did probably see my video, and she said on her Instagram, she's like, people get so upset. They are just like absolutely livid when they find out that I'm saving my first kiss for my wedding day. And then she reshares a Kirk Cameron thing about how he doesn't kiss actresses when he's an actor. He doesn't believe in that and how like the sacredness of the kiss. And I'm like, she's talking about me thinking that I would make fun of that. I was like, I actually believe that you should only engage in the level of sexuality that you feel comfortable with, given that you're in a construct that is very shame-based, and that you should operate in the level that you're comfortable
But
with.
if you don't feel comfortable kissing your partner, I wouldn't say you're ready to make a lifelong commitment to them.
Yeah.
I don't think you know
That's like, we don't
what the construct
care
is that
whether
you're even
you're
entering
kissing or
into.
not.
Yeah, I'm not like, you guys should definitely kiss. You guys should definitely have sex if you love each other. I'm like, there's a lot of interplays where like that could not be the right choice for you. I don't know. I haven't walked in your shoes. I don't know what constructs you have in your brain that are going to fuck you up.
But it's like if you haven't even felt what it's like to kiss the person, it is just like magical thinking to think that you can somehow. I mean, you might get lucky and marry them and it's okay, but like statistically, probably no. I also think it's interesting.
Aaron Burrell beating the odds.
Yeah, I know. It says sex can't be minimized and reduced to two people enjoying a passionate exchange.
You always need a third person watching, which is God.
But I feel like it's them that minimize it and reduce it to two people enjoying a passionate exchange, because they're saying basically all of the secular world's ideas about sex being an exchange of love and mutual care and a bonding experience, they're basically saying that all of that's just not real and valid. So it is them themselves that are doing that. They're literally saying if you're having sex before marriage, all it is a passionate exchange. Never mind what the people's lived experiences are of people that are having sex before marriage.
Great point.
And it says sex is about so much more than feelings and doing what seems right in the moment. It's so much more than a bodily action between two consenting people.
I agree. It's more than that.
Yeah,
I agree.
We'd all agree with
Yeah.
that. But just because you say, but God doesn't agree. Like God actually, it's not loving. Even if you're feeling an increase in love and compassion for your partner and an increased bond, like that's not valid.
Again, going back to Tanner's amazing rant about like it's not valid if it's not from our government and in the right eyes of our Christian God. That sexual exchange is now completely not on the level anymore. Like it's really just these constructs of like the papers signed, the agreements made, and I was like, it can be between whatever a night of a bond between two people or a lifelong one, and that's not up for
Isn't it crazy that a population so prone to trumpeting the importance of small government is totally in favor of the government having to approve of every single relationship in order for it to be valid in the eyes of God? Kind of weird.
Projection, as we keep saying, is just so real. Again, it just feels like so many of the ideas that these like Puritans will fight against are the very things they're almost reinforcing, you know. And it's like, yeah, if you set up sort of a culture, a system where sex before marriage makes your life worse, there's a high chance it will, because you're living within that bubble where, like, you know.
That's what I mean by, like, yeah, operate whatever level that you want to, but understand that there's an entire construct of why you can only operate at that level and what you view as the... Remember when you guys were making your TikTok video about the pros and cons, that girl was writing out the pros and cons of staying or leaving the LDS church? And it wasn't like why she stays, but it was like a way that she operates within it. It's like that too. It's like the pros and cons of having sex without God's approval and then within marriage and approval. You don't even know what you're saying. You don't even know the pros and cons. You wouldn't even be able to do it because you haven't experienced it. You're still in this construct where you can only operate with what's been told to you about those things.
And as Stephen Hassan, creator of the Bite Model, emphasized a lot in his Mormon Stories interview we did, the primary thing with all of these high control groups is phobia indoctrination. So it's making you terrified to break the group's rules because bad things will happen to you. Often that is like a self-fulfilling prophecy because the shame has been installed long before you even consider doing those things, but also just the idea that if you leave the group as a whole, everything's going to be terrible. This says lie number 4 is femininity is about being seductive and powerful. We all know that it's not about being powerful, according to these two. Women with sexual morals and values are often considered insecure and prudish. Under like the sort of new progressive lens on sexuality, we don't care if people don't want to have sex. We're actually very for people not doing things they don't want to do. That's kind of the whole thing. It works both ways. We might question the why behind why you do or don't do things, and like shame isn't a good like driving force for your life. So if you want to be, for example, if you're Jennifer and you want to be having sex with Jake, and the only reason you're not doing it is because of shame or this like perceived bad things are going to happen to you if you do, then that is kind of like an issue worth exploring. But also I feel like the progressive view on sex is also like very understanding of insecurity, and it's not about just like bulldozing your insecurities and doing things you don't want to do. So it's like being prudish, like not wanting to do certain sexual things is totally fine. Not wanting to be sexual at all is totally fine. But like insecurity is usually something worth looking at one way or another. It doesn't mean you have to do anything like sexually. But, like, yeah, uproot insecurity. I think that's generally a good thing.
Because when you always say, like, if sexuality is just kind of like one modality of discovering other things about yourself, and so if you're not as sexual as people typically are at that age or something, it's not that you should be doing that, but that insecurity in whatever form that it's taking sexually, it might be coming out in something else, and, like, that's going to be your lifelong journey to figure out. Mm-hmm. And it's just sexuality is just maybe one way it's showing up, and you don't need to start from a place of shame that you're not like other people, but just, like... Am I doing okay?
It's funny because they said earlier that, God designed sexuality so that we can learn more about him. If you take a more like universalist view of God, I feel like sexuality is a way that we can learn about God, or, can sort of learn about everything in ourselves and, the divine within and without, whatever.
Is he thinking about other women? No, I'm thinking about a man. God.
Sexuality is more than being called a queen or a goddess, guys.
Is it?
It's actually
They've
not.
just picked up on
Tell
like
us, queen.
The first thing I disagree with in this whole book.
It's all about that.
About
100%.
Yeah, it's about being called a good girl.
Literally.
I just said that.
On the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Queen, bottom.
I'm having a parasocial relationship with Nikki Glazer right now because I just listened to a podcast of hers while I was getting my eyelashes done, and she said that she likes to be called good girl in bed, and then she said that she doesn't believe in free will and like 9 other things that I'm like, Nikki, I'm your best friend. I'm like, no.
This chapter is called The Hero Every Woman Needs. How much do you want to bet that it's God?
It's Jesus, for sure. It's not going to be their husband.
It's
like the man that will compensate.
Pee break real quick.
Jesus.
Girl, you were made for intimacy. Is one chapter title.
Queen.
I don't like reading about their marriage sex, though. Zach wrapped his strong arms around me in a big hug and whispered, I love you. The night was filled with romance and passion. It was spectacular.
Okay, that's the hubris of Christians and people of all religions to be like, I'm having this deep, wonderful, pure thing, and you are all wicked, vile sinners who could never get it. And it's like, wow, you're describing good sex, which we've all had. I'm sorry that you have to feel like you're a better person and that you get to go to super paradise heaven and we have to burn in hell because we enjoyed sex that wasn't approved by the government.
Can I just say, this is before Bethany was married. There's just like this little section. Bearing in mind, this is a sex book, right, from Christian women who can only have sex while married. As I type these words, I'm unmarried. I've never had sex and I have no real experience in this area.
Well, great. I'm glad we've got an expert finally.
So it's literally at that point just magical thinking that this like idea that you've been sold about Christian marriage and sex is going to play out well for you, which we know from her content that she's made since being married, it hasn't gone that well.
This is the biggest problem with people who are in any religion that are considered spiritual leaders who haven't lived the life that they're trying to help people along that journey, that they have not lived that life, but all they're doing is just perpetuating things of other people who haven't lived that life. They haven't lived it healthily either. And they're still just like these spiritual leaders where I'm like, if the spirit connection you're talking about that you're trying to drive home in this book, that spiritual connection that God is in the bedroom with you, but they've never experienced it. Like, can you imagine like a more egotistical standpoint of like, I still know what that maker wants for you, sexually speaking, even though I've never experienced it. It's religion.
So that leads me to a point of part of the shame mechanism, I think, and I brought this up before, is that I think it's supposed to not work for everybody because sex is such a powerful drive, obviously. So many people are not going to stay chaste until or through their marriage. Like, statistically, it doesn't happen. So then what you get is you have all these people who have been imbued with these horrific shame associations with sex who then break the rules, experience all the shame that they were promised would happen to them, and then they're like, oh, I have lived the other life. I've made mistakes, and I finally repented and went back to Jesus, and I'll never go back to my old ways. I've been born again. And it's like, you had a couple, maybe, experiences. Religion literally incapacitated you from functioning properly in the real world. And then when you were unable to function properly in the real world and have, like, healthy, good relationships because you're coming out of a brainwashed cult, and there's few branches of Christianity that I wouldn't classify as a cult. There are some liberal ones, and y'all know who you are.
You can't say you've experienced life outside of Christianity if you haven't deconstructed Christianity.
Right, that's what I've come back to Christianity, and I look at the teachings of Jesus, and I say I see that with a whole new appreciative lens. I truly have been born again in a way that has completely distanced me from the previous self that I was before. If your born again experience means you believe all the exact same things that you did before, I'm sorry, you weren't born again. You just, like, that's not it.
Yeah.
That's not it.
It's not
you haven't died. What died?
Apparently our truest longing isn't actually for sex, it's for real genuine intimacy. False dichotomy in my mind.
Yeah. That's the name of the book.
There's only two types of things.
False dichotomy.
Also, that's why deep down in our hearts we know something isn't right about porn. We know it's not real intimacy. Well, it can be. And I'm guessing it just depends on who's creating it.
I have literally watched porn afterward and then been like, thank you too. It was so nice getting to share that experience with you guys. Yeah, really.
When I, Kristen, was in the midst of my ongoing struggle with masturbation, I honestly wondered if I would ever break free.
We need to give her that recovering masturbator shirt. We should send her that. I should have worn it today.
I felt alone and defeated. I felt dirty and ashamed. If you're in the midst of your own struggle, you may feel the same way. You may wonder if freedom is really possible. Regardless of where you're at right now, the two of us want to invite you to join us in a fresh dialogue as we discover what the Bible has to say about this relevant issue.
I can't wait till a Bronze Age mythology instructs me on what I should do with my sexual partners.
I know. What's that thing, like, if you spill your seed not in your brother's sister? I can't remember.
Yeah. if it's your brother's concubine, rape is okay. As long as he acquired her from the Medes and the Persians and didn't take her from one of the daughters of God.
So it's shitting on sex experts for saying that masturbation is healthy, which she may have come around to, although I think still only within a marriage.
That had to have shattered some illusions that we are.
Can I just say, this is so classic. Although the Bible never uses the word masturbation, it's not silent on the issue.
Maybe that's kind of what it means.
You gotta read between the lines on a lot in the Bible.
Well, the Bible didn't say anything about titty fucking. It didn't.
While the Bible is not explicitly mention motorboating.
Don't act like it's silent. There's still a purr.
Masturbation is often fueled by lust. It fails to bring glory to God.
What does the Bible say about masturbation? Was there any...
As Tim Challies writes, that guy, a close examination of the Bible's teachings on sexuality uncovers no reason to believe that God ever intended sex to be a private pursuit. So just because it doesn't say you can masturbate. Indeed, the heart and soul of sexuality is the giving and receiving of sexual pleasure between two people, one husband and one wife. It's not how the Bible goes.
The Bible does not. Yeah, he's misquoting the Bible for sure.
Sex is intended to be a means of mutual fulfillment, which it obviously hasn't been historically in Christianity.
I hate when people speak authoritatively about what is natural in the eyes of God without ever observing nature. Like, ooh, homosexuality is unnatural. Anal sex is unnatural. It's like, have you ever witnessed the animal kingdom that is just living out God's fantasy without sin? They're just living blissfully like Adam and Eve without making choices to follow the devil. They're freaky deaky as shit. They're doing all kinds of stuff. In fact, anal sex is more common in the animal kingdom than tongue kissing.
That makes sense, I suppose.
Only bonobos and us do it.
But that's why speciesism is also inherent to these kinds of ideologies.
Of course.
Because we have to put ourselves above other animals, and then we can if we have dominion, they're dirty, they're animals, they're something different.
But animals
can't accept
masturbate.
evolution.
What are you saying? It's evident that God never intended. If God had intended a few more things, he would have made things a bit more clear.
Quote bubble, you are not a victim of your sex drive. This whole book is just literally telling you that you are a victim of your sex drive.
This whole book reminds me of the meme of the person with the boot on their head.
Yeah. It's basically just saying, God can help you overcome your sex drive, you know?
The cardboard cutout of the monsters and laying down next to it.
He's giving you the power through his Holy Spirit to say no to your flesh and yes to righteousness.
So weird then that so many pastors and preachers and
they should be the arbiters of
issues
it.
with sexual dysfunction.
They own the gas station.
Yeah, for as much attention we get as drag queens these days, it's the headlines that are just littered with pastors and priests and bishops.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to them if it actually works, but that just sounds nice. It sounds like there's this magical thinking Holy Spirit power that can just be like, I know this is all really hard and I'm going to sell you something, and then what it is just this invisible and unseeable power that we're just going to sell you. And then people who you think have it the most are actually doing the most raping, but we'll ignore that sad little fact.
No. You get the pleasure of knowing that you're better than other people, that you're saved and they're condemned to hell. They're going to burn in heaven.
That's actually a good point. You're not actually getting the spirit to keep you away from your sexual desires. You're just getting the egoic satisfaction that you kind of could if you wanted to, but you can't. But at least you're in the cool club.
Yep.
So now they answer 7 hush-hush questions, and I'm just going to go through these quickly because this is getting to be really long.
Quietly.
And we have a video to film for Kara's channel right after this. So the first question is, if a girl is going to be single for her whole life, does that mean she will never have sex at all? The answer here is basically yes, because our ultimate need is not for sex, but for a deep relationship with Jesus.
If you didn't get it,
apparently Jesus...
What seems more unnatural than that? What is being go against your own nature, the way that God actually created you? Just forego that craving for intimacy and connection with another being, which is one of the most, as you have described, beautiful, connective, transcendent experiences you can have, and just be that's not for you. You're not allowed to. My God doesn't like it. My Bronze Age mythology does not approve, actually. The Book of Talking Snakes has hard no on that.
Second question is sex really as great as everyone says it is? They kind of dance around this. It's basically yes and no, you know? 3, what is allowed before marriage? I mean, obviously sex is reserved for marriage, but how much is too much during dating? And then Bethany laments that the Bible doesn't come with a checklist. Have you read between the lines, Bethany? Because there might be more there than you know. But it basically says, instead of asking how much can I get away with, we should be asking how much can I cherish and preserve for my marriage. Your focus should be on pushing your boyfriend toward Christ and toward purity.
Toward Christ and purity.
It seems like basically...
When I stand on the altar on my wedding day, what regrets do I not want to have?
Just jumping blindly into a physical connection. That would be a huge source of regret for me.
When I was dating Aaron, and I had a firm line of where we wouldn't go because I was trying to think of what regrets do I not want to have, and I wanted to make sure I was better than everyone else.
Oh, did it work?
I did.
Oh,
It did. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to have a civil ceremony and then get married later. I wanted to be I did it. I have a high sex drive, but I'm still better than all of you people who can do it because I had self-control.
Most people are seeking that out more than anything else in the world is the feeling of like, I'm good while everybody else is condemned and evil.
Boring. Question 4 is, could you talk about LGBTQ and your thoughts on that? I'm not really sure about any of this stuff. And then it basically just says...
Me neither. We
Your
don't
number
know.
one priority should be you should love the Lord your God with all your heart. It says we need to strive to love all people fully and graciously while still embracing God's truth. So it's basically just like be homophobic. 5, how do I handle my same-sex attraction? And then it said the answer is remember that same-sex attraction is a sinful desire. It's how you respond to that sinful desire that's important.
Again, the
God is a reserve for
categorization
us.
of impulses as evil or good versus just like notes on a piano that get played at different times.
6, I was sexually abused when I was 7. I haven't healed from the past and I don't know what to do. Can you please help?
Will you give us the name of the
Basically
pastor?
just says, I know, right? 7, I'm unsure of how to move beyond my sexual past and not let it hold me back. Can I start over? And then obviously it's like you can...
That's what
You
this
can
whole thing is
atone.
for, is to keep you in that shame cycle. It's not supposed to end. You can be redeemed and feel bad later.
The last chapter is
All
called
the way to
Finally
heaven.
Satisfied.
Are
But
you
Bethany's
guys?
still a virgin when this was written.
Bridegroom. Ah.
There's a section called Pleasures Forevermore.
Well, what did we learn about sex today, boys and girls?
What resists persists. Hot stuff coming through.
I've been drained. Sometimes we do videos and I'm energized at the end. Sometimes we do videos and I'm drained. This was a drainy one.
It's just like sex in that way.
Subscribe
are
to
we gonna
Zelf on the
wrap this up?
Shelf.
We came, we read, we will never come again. We'll wait till he comes.
Nobody came, but the bridegroom cometh.
Yep, he cometh.
What's up,
In all of
sometime
our
soon?
hearts, in us. Remember, even when you're alone, you have a man inside you, and that man's name is Jesus, and he loves you very
There
much.
is a man
Inside of me tonight, his name is Jesus,
my daddy in the sky. Stay tuned for that and support us on Patreon so we can make a music video for it.
Okay, love you. Thanks for watching.
Love you guys.
Hop on over to Kara's channel to watch the video that we're about to do.
Yeah, let's go. Take us somewhere new. I want to know what to do with this book. Can't believe I spent $12 on it. At jeffbezosland.com.
That's a tax write-off.
I know.